When Jade first came out in 2024, I'm going to be honest with you, I did not get the hype. I was a quote-unquote Jade hater. But the funny thing is that over the past couple of months, while I have put more time into Jade and truly discovered a perfected setup on her, she has easily become one of my favorite Warframe to play in any public mission, because the amount of things that she does and the way that she promotes you to play the game is different than any other character. And then there's also the fact that she does this to enemies, and that does make me want to play her a little bit more, to be honest with you. Hello everybody, my name is Kai and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be talking about Jade and why I genuinely think that she is one of the strongest Warframes in the game right now, with damage and KPM that rivals Hildren and a level of support that pretty much no other character achieves. I don't like to waste your time though, so let's just get right into it. Jade's passive is actually quite unique. Her profound understanding of the relationship between life and death grants her 2 aura mod slots. And while very simple to understand, this is a pretty crazy thing to have on a Warframe. Aura mods are some of the most unique and powerful effects we have in the game, so getting to double up on 2 of them makes building Jade not only significantly easier because yes, both of these mods will actually add capacity to her, but you can also create some pretty cool combinations. Jade's first ability is Light's Judgement. You throw a plume in an arcing trajectory that will phase through enemies, and when it lands on surfaces, it creates a 6-meter field lasting for 10 seconds at base. All enemies within this field take 500 heat damage per half second, and as you can see, gain the Judgement debuff shown above their head. This is actually another part of her passive. It says that some of her abilities apply judgments, when really it is only her 1st and 4th ability, and this judgment just increases enemy damage vulnerability by 50% for 10 seconds. This is completely unaffected by ability strength, but is essentially a 1.5 times damage multiplier for any enemy with it, and we're never going to say no to that. There is a heal factor present on this ability, healing Jade and allies within range for 8% of their maximum health per second. This does scale with ability strength, but unfortunately, things like defense objectives instead get a flat 75 HP per second, which is pretty annoying to be honest. But for players, the buff will persist after leaving the field for a short duration of 10 seconds, and while you cannot stack them on top of each other to get the benefit of multiple heals, it will just stay on you indefinitely for as long as you are within the circle. You can have 5 of these judgments at once. They will stack their damage on enemies even if they do not stack the heal on players, and it does have an augment of Jade's Judgment, which allows you to apply the Jade Eximus effect to enemies, and conceptually, this is very strong. But unfortunately, the damage output is too low and it is too slow to actually be worth using in practice. Not recommended. Next up we have Jade's second ability, Symphony of Mercy. This is a cycle ability, all 3 versions being shown right above your weapons HUD in the bottom right. You can tap to rotate between the 3 buffs counterclockwise, and then you hold to activate whichever of the selected ones. Importantly, while the buff is active, you can freely rotate between the other buffs to give yourself and all allies within affinity range the active buff whenever you want. All 3 effects provided here are incredibly strong. The first, Power of the 7, simply giving you more ability strength. But more ability strength in mission is one of the strongest things we can get. And of course, this bonus will scale with the amount of ability strength you mod on outside of the mission, or any other buffs you do get inside the mission too. So it creates a sort of feedback loop where you get more strength, which makes this ability more powerful, thus giving you more ability strength in total. Deathbringer is a simple damage increase of 100%, but it is a universal bonus, meaning that it applies to all of your weapons, some abilities, and namely your operator. This is one of the only operator base damage buffs from a Warframe in the entire game. And then lastly, with the Spirit of Resilience, this gives you a 10% shield restore per second with a 10% shield recharge delay reduction. And yes, this does overflow into overshields. The ability strength bonus does cap at 150%, but that would require you to hit 600% strength, which we don't do on this build. But the combination of the shield buff with Arcane Aegis and Fast Deflection makes Jade nearly unkillable as long as you just rotate to the Spirit of Resilience anytime that your shields get broken. And there is also a duration increase mechanic built into the ability. If you get kills on enemies that are affected by Judgment, it will actually add 2 seconds to the ability timer. Jade's third ability is Ophanim Eyes, casting summoning her choir to her side. Now, all enemies within 20 meters and a 70-degree cone in front of Jade take 50 heat damage per second, are slowed by 15% per second, and permanently lose 10% of their armor and shields per second. And then as you can see, a full strip will force a heat status proc. Seeing as the armor strip does scale with ability strength, of course, this means that by modding on a decent amount of the stat, we can get this armor strip to completely remove all of enemies' defenses in 3 seconds or less on the final build, especially considering that we get more ability strength from Power of the 7. What is even more powerful though is that when you gaze upon fallen allies, you can actually revive them from a distance. This is really useful for game modes like ETA or EDA, meaning that even if you somehow cannot keep your teammates alive with Spirit of Resilience, all you have to do is look at them and you will revive them. This capability is also removed if you subsume Ophanim eyes onto another Warframe, so Jade is the only one with this ability. Importantly, the eyes do stay active while you are an operator, which means that if these enemies weren't armor stripped, but I just cast and then I activate Deathbringer and then come into operator, I have a very easy time killing these enemies now because Jade will be armor stripping them for me while I shoot them. And then of course the 100% base damage bonus to operators is really, really good. Finally, we have the main DPS ability from Jade, Glory on High. Activating this ability puts Jade into a flight mode. Now she has complete omnidirectional movement, moving at a speed of 7.2 meters per second, which is additive with other speed bonuses. In this state, you also gain 35% damage reduction, which is capped at 50%, and you are of course counted as airborne for any relevant mods. In this form, you gain access to Jade's secondary exalted weapon, Glory, which is an infinite ammo, no reloading AoE weapon. The primary fire launches heat projectiles that on contact explode for 150 damage in a 2-meter radius. This of course scales with the range stat and primed fulmination. It does require LOS, but punch through will allow it to hit enemies through walls, if you have any of that from any source. You can use the alternate fire to detonate any judgments that you have out to deal damage in an admittedly massive radius, especially with the right setup. But I am personally not a fan of building like this, even if it is relatively powerful. The gameplay loop that is desired of you by going around with Glory on High and using Light's Judgment is throwing down your first ability and then just detonating it against all enemies. This used to be an incredibly energy intensive way to play. This is now pretty much negated by the fact that Arcane Sculptor triggers off of Light's Judgment, but people have already covered that build, and in my opinion, it isn't as strong as what I was going to show you before they added the Arcane anyways. And then of course there is also the annoying fact that it doesn't scale off of things like base damage or multi-shot, which means that if you want to actually use the primary fire in Glory on High while building for the alt fire, it's going to deal no damage. Instead, what we are going to do is make Jade's primary fire so strong that it genuinely begins to rival Hildren levels of damage. What a surprise, she completely destroys all of them immediately. The damage of Glory consists entirely of heat, which means that we can, fortunately, use a single mod to get Blast onto the weapon. Blast is an especially strong status to use on Jade because this weapon is inherently AoE, meaning that it will quadratically scale damage per enemy hit. And also her base damage buff from Deathbringer is one of the only ways to buff Blast in the entire game. And if we fill out the rest of our mod slots, here is what the build looks like. The critical chance on the weapon is really low at 15%, so we do use secondary enervate to compensate, the added synergy between this Arcane and Blast being a big benefit here. Primed Fulmination obviously scales the radius of the attack to be significantly larger than it already is. Most importantly, it is multiplicative with your range stat. To take advantage of all of our crit chance from Enervate, we are using Prime Target Cracker, Hornet Strike for our base damage. We cannot use Galvanized Shot because it is all AoE, Galvanized Diffusion for more multi-shot, Bane Mod to double dip on the Blast procs, Elementalist to multiply the Blast procs again, and then this is more fire rate and multi-shot. I mean, like, what more could we ask for? The way that we build Jade focuses really heavily on range, the 250% combining with Primed Fulmination to bring the primary fire explosion radius from 2 meters to 7.2 meters, which is a 12 times increase in the base area. And the reason we are also running pretty high ability strength here through Growing Power, Humble Intensify, and Transient Fortitude is because strength effectively quadruple dips on the damage that Glory does on this build. Buffing your ability strength will make Symphony of Mercy give us more ability strength, which we can then activate before activating Glory. More strength also increases the base damage on Glory, which then gets increased again by Zada's Whisper. Zada's Whisper, as you know, is by and large the strongest helmet ability to use on any build that uses the blast status. I don't feel like I need to explain this one again. I've talked about this a ton recently, but it is just that powerful. As I said before, survivability is completely taken care of by the Spirit of Resilience, Arcane Aegis, and Fast Deflection. If you ever start losing some of your HP, simply just switch to that buff and you can pretty much never die. Corrosive Projection definitely isn't needed because we are armor stripping enemies with Ophanim eyes, but it does allow us to get them down to a more acceptable limit a little bit quicker, but you could switch this out for anything else if you want. Arcane Velocity gives Glory a much needed increase in base fire rate, and then Primed Flow and Streamline are used here simply to manage the energy drain on Glory on high. Though at only 2.75 per second, you really won't have much issues with it. I am also running 3 Violet Shards with the Equilibrium effect to further assist with energy management, and then 2 Casting Speed Shards are going to make her feel a lot more comfortable to play. The weapons you decide to use are actually pretty important here, the Cedo Prime being my choice of shotgun, not because it's really good or anything, but because it is a good taxi for the Amalgam Shotgun Barrage mod, increasing your revive speed by 45%. This does in fact apply to Ophanim Eyes reviving allies at range. So you could technically use whatever shotgun you want. The only reason I'm using Cedo is because it is just a good weapon, but just make sure you have this mod equipped. It makes Ophanim Eyes way faster. The Grimoire should be used with the Volm Invocation to snapshot the benefit on your Symphony of Mercy at a higher value to give more ability strength to all of your kit. You could use other invocations, but I don't think that they're really necessary. Strength is definitely the best scaler here. And then the Okina Prime is actually a really important choice because the 3rd evolution of Swordsman's Celerity will apply to your movement in Glory on high and makes getting around the map way quicker than if you didn't have it active. Panzer is a great companion here, buffing damage by putting Firewall on enemies, giving us more crit damage, more fire rate, and then generating a ton of HP orbs for us to convert with Equilibrium. Your focus tool should be Matarai to snapshot the Sling Strength buff for Symphony of Mercy. And then if you really want to min-max this build, I would actually recommend using the Operator Arcane Zid on Uskos if it wants to show me. Thank you. This arcane gives you a maximum of 250% more non-combining heat damage for secondary weapons, and does apply to Glory on high. Because of the way that Zada's Whisper buffs the damage of blast procs that it duplicates, getting the 250% bonus from the Operator will make your blast significantly stronger. And as I showed before, Jade has a really easy time making your Operator kill enemies, because you can activate Glory on high, park your Jade up in the air, activate Ophanim Eyes, swap over to Deathbringer, hop out, and then just start shooting enemies. And it's like really easy to kill them. Lately, Jade has really been one of my favorite Warframes in the entire game. The simplicity of her second ability and the fact that you can just activate all these buffs and then swap between them whenever you want to help your teammates out however they need is really fun. And then of course there is the crazy damage capability she has by combining Glory on high with Zada's Whisper. That is all I have to showcase for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one and learned something valuable. Enjoy the gameplay, and I will see you all very soon. Peace.